Welcome to the Red Light Exposé podcast.
We are an international grassroots survivor-led circle.
Our goal is to counter the growing acceptance of sex work ideology.
We aim to raise awareness of the harms of commercializing sex,
meaning prostitution, porn, stripping, and BDSM.
Through honest, in-depth conversations,
we elevate voices often ignored and silenced.
Together, we're challenging stereotypes and dismantling myths.
We envision a healthier, safer society, especially for women and girls.
We appreciate your company on this journey. Welcome back to Red Light Exposé podcast. This episode is part of our Men for Equality series, where we highlight the voices of 8 men who are doing important work that supports the movement to end commercial sexual exploitation. These men are survivor activists, policy advisors, and passionate changemakers. Red Light Exposé thanks Empower Men for their generosity in helping to make this series possible. You can check out and support the great work they are doing on their website, empowermen.ca. And now to the episode.
Hi, welcome to Red Light Exposé. I'm your host, Sybil Jo. I'm a mother of 3, writer, and line cook, currently recovering from 15 years in the commercial sex abuse industry in the Southeast U.S. Today, I'm talking to Cristian Eduardo about masculinity, commercial sexual exploitation, and how boys and men can break free of the toxic cultural messages that make them vulnerable to abuse. Cristian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Cristian Eduardo. I'm originally from Mexico. I'm a survivor of international domestic sex and labor trafficking. Big part of my work has been always advocating for the LGBTQ+ community, the immigrant community, and really focus on educating just the public in general about gender-based violence, including femicide and human trafficking. Interesting enough, human trafficking is seen as this whole entity separate from other forms of violence. So I think that it's very, very important to always educate the community, professionals in the field, law enforcement, politicians, everyone around the complexities of human trafficking. And I'm also a huge advocate of the equality model. I really believe that in order to address these huge issues that we have around prostitution, exploitation, the normalization of buying someone else just because you have disposable income, we need a really holistic and complex solution. So I'm very, very happy to be here because I think that male and boys are often left out of the conversation. And if we want to solve this, we definitely need to include boys and males in the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about having this conversation. I've listened to a number of your other interviews with Exit Wound in particular. I really enjoyed that one. And particularly your focus on what you just said about trying to separate sex trafficking from other kinds of abuse, as if there are these different things happening and not recognizing the patterns and how it's really all connected. So I'm excited to get into that.
Absolutely. Yes, and it's one of the big things that I have seen during the advocacy and working with a lot of victims and survivors of domestic violence, that once we start talking about human trafficking, they come to the realization that, wait, I was trafficked by my family members. I was trafficked by my husband. I was trafficked by my boyfriend. In reality, that domestic violence, it can be one component of human trafficking. It's interesting for me how we don't utilize all the knowledge and tools that we have developed for domestic violence. And if we just literally translate all that, even around consent, power dynamics to prostitution, the sex trade, everybody will understand. And I think that it's because prostitution is a huge industry where people are profiting from it, but there's a lot of resistance and people are like hyper focused on consent. And it's so interesting for me that is this piece of like, no, each individual can make their decisions, but also we forget how we are communities and how our individual choices are a lot of times informed by the systems that we live in. And especially like the patriarchy, capitalism, a lot of times what we think is consent, it can be force, fraud, coercion, and we barely talk about all this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads very well into, what you were just saying about a lot of people not realizing that what they've gone through actually is trafficking and actually is, under legal definition, sexual assault or sexual abuse. most people don't think like that in their regular everyday lives. And then, like you said, we start sharing stories with each other and we realize how common the stories are. Something I've really enjoyed about being part of this podcast is there are survivors all over the world that we're talking to, and we have these similar stories, and we can start to put it together and make sense of it. And if you can make sense of it, then you can do something about it.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think that that's the common component that I have seen also with working with people from different countries, from different backgrounds, people still engaging in the commercial sex trade, or people in prostitution, people who have age out of in prostitution, like people who identify as survivors. It's the same. When you hear the stories, you start seeing components of violence, abuse, survival, need, and most of the time there's this third party trafficker, the virtual owner, but a lot of times we forget that is the sex buyer also, who is actually exploiting the individual in need. And I think that that's so important to recognize that it's not out of the void. I think that in all the years that I have do advocacy, meeting survivors, engaging with different communities, I have never heard someone saying, well, just one day I woke up and I decided to sell my body. It was always really coming out of survival, need, coercion, immigration status, not able to speak the language in the country that you are, past experiences around violence, abuse. It's really what is creating and fostering this environment for people to move towards that path that is like always prostitution is saying, we welcome you, we accept you in the way that you are, with the only condition that you are being bought and sold.
I'm really familiar with the ways that girls and women get sucked into this abuse, but I'm less familiar with how boys and men get groomed into it. I see a lot of advertisement. I come from a tourist area, and there's a lot of billboards for strip clubs. There's advertisements in the phone book for women, saying, hey, come, you can make a good living. But I don't see the same for boys and men. And so I kind of assume there must be like other channels that maybe aren't as in the common gaze. So if you could just speak to kind of what the common story for a boy coming up into this.
Yes, I would say that one of the big things that we hear all across, not only in the United States, but all across the world, is that for a lot of men, it started when they are boys. And this really intersects with experiencing poverty, being part of the LGBTQ plus community, or just literally someone that is not fitting a nuclear family, or that is having a background in their house where there's abuse, violence. So a lot of homeless boys are recruited into the commercial sex trade. For me, it's interesting because the understanding that we have for girls and women about how they are exploited, I think that it has been evolving through time, our understanding. And if we apply how we start addressing it for women and girls to men and boys, there are a lot of similarities. One of the main reasons we don't see a lot is that the stigma around sex, and especially males having sex with other males. I think that for the purposes of protecting the sex buyers, as is always the case, it's more underground. It's like, oh, this is a secret that I'm doing, versus for women and girls that it's more accepted in our society. Like, oh, if I'm buying sex, it means that I have power. It means that I have enough money, that I'm successful. But if I'm engaging with sex as a male with another male, that I'm going to be labeled as gay, as weak. So it's like, no, we need to keep it in secret. Escort agencies for males, it's very, very dominant. Also, it's happening in a lot of bars. I have seen here in New York how traffickers are trying to recruit young boys, telling them that, oh, that you're handsome. I work in this model venue and you should model and all these things. And I'm like, it's the same that they are doing with women and girls. It's just that it's a little bit more silent and a little bit more in secret. And I really think that it's to protect sex buyers, because sex buyers don't want to be seen as part of a minority and reduce their power. And the other thing is that men and boys are oftentimes criminalized. I think that it has been happening also for women and girls, especially in prostitution. Oftentimes, we forget this component of forced criminality. And the same way that we are identifying trauma responses for women and girls, if we do the flick back for both boys and men, it would be the same. Like a lot of times male don't want to disclose because it's like, no, it means that I wasn't able to protect myself. I have been told my whole life that I cannot be a victim of sexual violence. The only role that I can serve is being the perpetrator. I have heard thousands of stories about males going even to police and say, I was abused. Literally, law enforcement will laugh at them like, oh, you're weak. We don't believe you. So I think that adding these more and more layers for creating this environment where the exploitation of male and boys is like, even if it's in front of us, nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And let's continue normalizing. When we talk about human trafficking, and it's true, most sex buyers are males. It's one thing that I really want everybody to understand when we're talking about the exploitation of men and boys. I have never heard, to be honest, a group of women saying like, let's go and buy a male just to have fun. And rape this man, like just to, and record it and make fun and all these things. I think that it is important to say that there are female sex buyers, but I think that it's as the result of normalizing or these attitudes. And I think that it's not a way to justify that it's not a gender issue problem anymore. It's not gender-based violence, but a lot of men and boys, especially when they are surrounded around sexual trauma, the only way to continue being themselves is like, I need to replicate all this sexual trauma. I need to continue buying people. The same thing that it was done to me, the same way that I was forced to be in silence, the same way that I was abused. And now I need to do this to people because that's the only way that I was taught to survive in this world.
That's really interesting. What you just said about the silence being there to protect the buyers. I had never thought of it that way before because I've heard people say like, oh, men don't disclose because of the stigma. And then I'm kind of like, yeah, women get stigma too. Like but I didn't think of it in that way. It's the stigma of the buyers for being homosexual.
Yes, there are so many components like religion, financial power. There's this idea that when you are gay, when you engage in sex with another male, it's like, oh, so you want to have sex with all the males that you know. Right? And I think that stigma is also sharing women and girls. Oh, but you look like you want to engage with sex. We see that you have been having like so many partners. So that means that you want to engage in sex with it. And I think that especially in this society where for males it's so important to show you're strong, that you're powerful, it's incompatible the idea that, oh, but I like to engage sexually with other men because that's associated with weakness. That's associated with not being male enough. The other part that is interesting is that this layer of stigma to protect sex buyers, to protect their status, to protect the dominance and power that they have, also it becomes hypersexualization, fetishizing, like, oh, I want to engage with someone that is a person of color because they are better at sex, because they can withstand more abuse and violence. This idea that a male is going to have sex with another male, it's also embedded in us. It's like, also they can withstand other things, because they like rough sex. They like sex with drugs and all these ideas that we have. So it's like, let me try it because it's normal for them. I don't need to worry about violence. I don't need to worry if there's feces, urination, blood, if there's like even physical like acts or behaviors of like that are mirroring torture. This is normalized. So when sex buyers came, they are like, but this is normal to you. You shouldn't be, I don't need to be introductory. I don't need to ask you. I can just step that and be like, I'm gonna do it because that's my expectation from you.
So I think we're getting into this concept of masculinity and talk. People say toxic masculinity. I really find that a redundancy because my understanding of masculinity has to do with this hierarchy. Someone's always on top and someone's always on bottom. And what you're describing is like sectioning off a population of boys and young men mostly, and they're going to be the ones on bottom. Just like you said, just like women and girls are the ones who are supposed to be on bottom and the buyers are supposed to be on top. And that's their idea of masculinity. Could you talk a little bit more about how these characteristics are played out? Especially, I think I'm interested in like before boys get involved in actual commercial sex? Like, how does masculinity groom boys and young men into certain attitudes about commercial sex? And do you think there's a correlation between masculine social norms and involvement in commercial sex?
No, absolutely. I think that the big example that I like to share is that I think that I was like 4 or 5 years old. My mom shared with me that my dad used to take me to brothels, literally, like at that age. And I think that when we talk about the normalization of exploitation and all these things, is like, even if you cannot communicate fluently verbally, even if you don't have really this understanding of the world, like kids, male boys at a young age, I've been exposed to all of this. Like, oh, there's one section, there's one group of people that are there to serve you. There's a certain group of people that are there to justify your masculinity, to justify that you are enough, to exert your dominance. You rule over them. And for me, like masculinity has always, I have always had trouble with masculinity because since I was a kid, I have never fit the idea of being masculine. I never liked soccer. I never liked aggression. The way that I move my hands, laughing too much, those are characteristics that are not matching masculinity, because masculinity is always seen as these little islands that are created on men and boys, that the only purpose is to separate us from one each other, not only from other men, but also from women and girls, from other individuals. That is like, you just need to care about yourself. What you suffer, you need to protect yourself from that, even if it means that you're going to harm other people. And it's always this idea of being yourself as an individual, closing yourself, that it doesn't matter where you are just going to prioritize yourself over other people. So I think that it really matched what you were saying about hierarchies, because it doesn't matter what I need to do. I need to get there to the top, because that's what I have been told. That's what I'm seeing in the world, that the only way that men are respected is buying other people, having sex with, or engaging in sex with whoever I want. Even if they don't want to, I can just give them substances. I can just give them money. I can just give them something that they need. And it can be like love, acceptance. And once I take dominance on that part of them, I can add them to my property. I can add them as a trophy for me. I think that masculinity is really one of the root causes of exploitation, because it's telling everybody like, you need to conquer whatever is outside. Stop seeing other people, other individuals as people, because the only one that matter is you. But at the same time, there's this dissonance that is like, but you cannot express feelings. The only way that you can do this is through violence. Remember, dominance is about power. It's about showing that you're strong enough, like to go over whatever happens to you. So you are not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to show happiness. You're not allowed to show any emotions. And as a result, you cannot be a victim of sexual violence. How come someone who is working towards becoming this huge king, this huge person who wants to be on the top hierarchy, you cannot be a victim, because that means that you are not fit for that seat. One other big thing that I have seen, and I hear it all the time, not only in here in the United States, but also in Mexico. I would say that in a lot of the Latino countries, I have heard the same, that when a boy turns maybe 18 or 15, it's their time to become a grown adult. And how do you become a grown adult? By engaging or be taken to buy sex. You're not just taking boys to engage to the first sexual act. You're actually telling them, I'm going to get someone that I'm going to pay, like the father, the friends, whoever is like gifting this experience, and be like, I'm going to buy it so you can access it. A lot of attitudes towards sex, toward people engaged in prostitution are like, but I'm paying. I shouldn't be worried about what happened to you. There's no coercion in this part. There's no abuse in this part, because that's the way that I was told. If I can take it, because someone else is paying for it, because there's something in the middle acting as a component of consent, I shouldn't have issues. And I think that we see it replicated later, like with the sexual violence. It was like, especially with women and girls, like, but they were wearing skirts. That was the component of consent. They were asking for it. Every single opportunity where you can exert your power and also give yourself that idea that is like, one more. I just conquer one more. Like, it doesn't matter the means. I'm just going to do it. I think that it's really normalizing all this idea of buying other people's just because you have the means without any consequence.
Yeah, this is great. I'm trying to like follow everything you say and organize my thoughts because there's so much there. Like we're always saying, we could do an episode on every one of these points that we're making. So we'll have to have you back on for sure.
Absolutely.
We want to take a brief moment to thank you for your listenership. As an independent volunteer collective, our episodes are only made possible because of donations from people like you. Please visit our website, www.redlightexposé.com, and click the donate button. Your support is greatly appreciated. And now, back to the episode.
First of all, what you were describing, I had also heard you say in another interview that everyone discharges their frustration at the one who isn't masculine enough. And the only way that masculinity teaches us to deal with our emotions is to harm others. Like you're saying, there's always this kind of vying to get to the top, but not everybody can be at the top at the time, right? So as you're getting to the top, you have to push someone else down. Derek Jensen, in his essay, The Man Box and the Cult of Masculinity, he says, I exist only insofar as I violate you. And it's that this finding of identity through perpetration. And, I'm so sorry to hear that, it started so young for you, that grooming. But I think what you're describing, I've heard it in my area, young boys, I think 15, 18 is old. Honestly, I think that's a higher than average because I've heard boys 12, 13 being taken to prostituted women. And like you said, they're learning a lesson about their entitlement and consent, but also their children and they're being sexually abused. And, it becomes this whole toxic tangle. I know as a girl growing up, and I've known a lot of women who have had questions about childhood sexual abuse in their past and like, did this cause me trauma or didn't it? And I've come to the conclusion that the culture is sexually traumatizing for boys and girls, sometimes different, sometimes, like you said, very similar ways. What you're describing about these separating you off into these separate little islands, and I can't think of any better way to keep people from organizing to resist oppression and fight for their rights than to keep them on these little islands. And so, I'm always trying to think about how does childhood sexual abuse that's just in the culture, whether you experienced it personally, whether you were raped as a child or whether you just like growing up, just knowing that it happens is traumatic. And then when we have this traumatic kind of break in our psyches, it makes us very, very easy to control and to get locked in these kind of brainwashed prisons.
Yes, no, absolutely. And you just remind me that one of the big things that I have seen, to be honest, all across the world, when teachers abuse their students, this is actually romanticized. And it's like, oh, you should be so grateful. Like an adult woman was desiring you. Like you had sex with someone older than you. You had sex with someone who is more experienced than you. So we minimize the impact of trauma. We normalize this grooming part. We normalize predatory behaviors. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about the impact of it. Even on the news, when they put that, it's like, it make it a joke. They make it like somewhat normal. I have heard friends talking about like, well, that happened to me, and it was the best experience of my life. And I'm like, I really don't think so. I really that we need to talk about child sexual abuse, to be honest. That's what happened. But I think that takes me to the other part. For a lot of boys and males, we don't have spaces to talk about this. There are a lot of studies about like child sexual abuse, how a lot of times is your family member or someone that you know. One big thing that I have in my personal experience is that even my friends, because I'm very open about like, oh, I'm a survivor of human trafficking, that it involves sexual violence, it involves all these components. I'm personally with HIV. I'm very open about being a gay man. A lot of the people that I know that are identified as males, they start disclosing, you know what? I think that I was abused by a family member. It's shocking to me because I'm 34 and not being able to talk about an experience that has shaped your whole life and keep it in silence for more than 10, 20, 30 years, of course it's going to have an impact on you. And as you were saying, I think that this create the perfect scenario. I remember being homeless, living in a shelter. I was really engaging with the LGBTQ community, doing outreach, condom distribution, STI testing. I was interacting with a lot of people that were engaged in prostitution, and I was financially struggling. And what a lot of people was telling me, other gay men, other people from the LGBTQ community, they were telling me, but you're young, you're good looking, why don't you can charge easily 300, 500. You don't need to be struggling. And it's not only that, normalizing and telling other people like sell yourself even if you dislike the person, it's normal. And I think that that's the repercussions of not having spaces to talk about the trauma, not recognizing how past experiences shape and influence our behaviors as adults. Because I think that we have kind of some understanding about exploitation and prostitution in kids, but with adults, it's suddenly like, oh, you turn 18, like, oh, whatever, like everything is consent. And it's like, I don't know who say that. Of course, pretty sure that sex buyers, they were the one asking. I'm pretty sure people think that prostitution exists because people want to sell their bodies, not because sex buyers want to buy us. That's the reality. But on top of that, and I cannot forget it because just to think that there's people out there in hard conditions trying to survive every day, what I was told it was, but this has happened to you. You have done it before. The difference now is that you're going to receive money. So now you're benefiting from it. You should be grateful about that. For me, it was very shocking because I was coming out of my sex and labor trafficking situation. I was like, this is exactly what I want to avoid. I don't want people to profit from my body. I don't want people to come and literally go through every single part, whole hair in my body and just take it out of me. Like, because this is clearly having an impact on me. And I was so shocked because it wasn't just one person. There were several people who were saying the same. But you have done it before. It has been taken from you. And even now, because of course I'm a gay male, I'm a person of color, I travel a lot of times because of work. I have been asked, are you a escort? Did you work in prostitution? That's why you travel? That's why you speak now better English? Because you're in prostitution? Like because you're selling services? Because the only way for us and the only space for people like me to thrive is like selling our bodies. But these ideas are really coming from sex buyers. I'm always talking about like traffickers, that's so important, but we need to talk about how sex buyers, those that think that buying other individuals, have normalized this, that is like, oh, you cannot thrive without us. We are doing you a favor. We have worked so hard. We are working 8 hours, so stressful. The minimum that you can do is release my stress. You should be grateful. I'm putting bread on your table. Wait, what? No, this is not the path that we, woman and girl, the LGBT community, other dissident communities, this is not the path that we should go. And people don't realize how much imbalance of power there is, how money has become a silencer, a suppressor of consent, and how we are never addressing the sexual violence. It's baffling to me that everyone is like, Sexual Awareness Month, and they talk about all the things, but they never talk about prostitution and how money, it's a coercive tool by itself.
Yeah, like you said earlier, the kind of idea, it's a really weird backwards idea that the money is the consent. Whereas to me, it seems obvious that the money is proof that there is no consent. You know what I'm saying? Like, if she wanted to be there, if you wanted to be there, you wouldn't need the money.
Yes. And I'm always telling people like, okay, if you are talking about consent, if we want to be trauma informed, as everybody's saying, if we want to be person centered, we need to create an environment where everybody has the same power and control, where we both parts are sharing. So why don't sex buyers buy one each other? They have disposable income. If it's only about sex, if it's not about dominance, if it's not about power, if it's not about oppressing women and girls or other like groups, if it's only sex for you, because that's why you are arguing, engage in buying sex to other sex buyers. Or like, I'm pretty sure that you don't need the money. You could do it for free, but that is not happening. And that's not the reality of the world that we are living. They go and pray where they know that they can get away from it. And the very sad part is that there's always the amount of money that you're receiving, or the amount of something of value that you're receiving, is gonna be based on how vulnerable you are, how much in need you are, because it's not the same someone who is a citizen, who is able to speak the native language of the country, versus someone that is like, literally, I cannot get a job because of my immigration status. Literally, I cannot. So they know that they're going to pay more based on the privilege of the person versus someone that is more in need. And they recognize that. They are like, oh, you know what? I want to go for cheaper one. I need to go to a poorest area or to a poorest region, or I will go with a Latina, or like with an Asian Pacific Islander, or with an immigrant, because I know that they are going to say yes, because I know that they need it. I think that we never talk about this. And beyond that, we never talk about when sex buyers kick you, stab you, when they hurt you, when they are threatening you, like to kill you. All these things that it's just so normalized, and there are components actually of abuse, torture, sexual violence, and everybody's advocating for all these things. But magically, they forget about prostitution. It's so interesting for me how we hyper focus on consent, and it's like, but they're adults, they're self-sufficient. Like, why should we put attention to that? Like, they are saying that they want to do this. So, like, let's just focus on safety, not for them, for the sex buyers, because it's like, especially when we talk about STIs, HIVs, and it's like, no, wait, you're talking actually about the sex buyers, because you know that they are buying people. There's so many components about prostitution and the act of buying people that people don't want to recognize, that people are so close to all of us. I think so that it's easier to be like, they're choosing it, they are deciding it, they're adult, they should be self-sufficient, they should be able to say no. And I'm like, are you hearing yourself? We have debunked all this myth in domestic violence, in sexual violence, in all other forms of abuse and violence that we have recognized. We have debunked these myths because we know that there are root causes. We know that there's imbalance in power. We know that money is a form of coercion, and just suddenly you cannot translate all that to this. And it is incredible how we always focus on the safety of the sex buyers, on the safety that they are buying, rather than our communities. People really fight for the right of entering prostitution, entering the sex trade, but everyone becomes silent when we talk about exit strategies. We have also the right to exit. We have the right to exist outside of someone buying me. Because if you are saying that my only value is when I'm being bought and sold, you are not even giving me like human rights. You are not even considering me like a human by myself. It's so, so important to talk about the violence, the sexual violence in prostitution. And it's interesting for me because I always thinking like, I don't know what your idea of sex buyers are. I think that a lot of people think that, oh, a sex buyer come and it's like, hi, my name is Cristian Eduardo. I'm 34. I live here. Here is my presentation card. This is my email. This is my actually personal phone number. Oh, what are your pronouns? Like, are we going to have a safe word? You know, I'm very concerned about you, like dealing with STI and HIV. I'm constantly doing check-ins. I brought my condoms. Like, are you allergic to latex? That you have any condition that is making it hard for you to engage in sex? Like, where in this world this is happening? Because I would like to know. And if this is happening, I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't be buying sex. Like, they will really understand about consent and about that all these complexities around engaging in sex consensually and in a very informed way.
Yeah, those are some great points, Christian. What's really standing out to me, what you said about they know. If they didn't know, they would be having sex with each other. If it wasn't about the violence, if it was just about sex. And so I often have this feeling, I feel like you're saying, like we play really dumb as a culture. We act like we don't understand what's going on. Like you said, we can understand it when it comes, and I've said these exact same things, when it comes to spousal abuse, when it comes to child abuse, when it comes to elder abuse. If we apply all of those exact same frameworks and say, well, what's happening here? But honestly, I think the reason that we don't do that as a culture is because there's a certain section of people that aren't people, and we don't apply those rules to. And so like what you're describing, that, you know, I was laughing as you were, you know, the perfect sex buyer. It's an elitist fantasy, right? This idea of this like nice liberal,
Yes.
that isn't the person that's going to be buying sex, because buying sex is about the violation.
This idea of sex buying, it's portrayed in all media, from newspaper, movies, books. They're always portrayed a person who is in prostitution. And I hate it so much, to be honest, especially in LGBTQ plus related series on all these things, how it's part of ourselves, like how prostitution has become a component of our culture, a component of our identity, and also how people fight to keep the status quo. I'm like, oh my God, like we have been fighting for years. We're still fighting around the world. We are being told you cannot be gay, you cannot be a lesbian, you cannot be transgender. And we choose to fight to protect sex buyers. We choose to fight for the right to people to continue buying us. Like, I don't think that matches with the idea of queer liberation. And I laugh when people are like, sometimes sex buyers just want to talk. Sometimes sex buyers, they have issues. Sometimes they are alone. Sometimes I'm like, you know, we have therapists, we have social workers, we are living in a community, we are living in a society, like we can address those issues. And the idea that you need to pay for someone to listen to you, it's very scary. If someone around you is not listening to you, there's a part that is systemic around men and boys that I think that we need to create more spaces. But also it's like, what are you really talking about? Are you talking about aggression? Are you talking about how you're enjoying actually to have the power and control? Because it is always towards that. Even if when people say like, people are buying me just because they want me to hear them, it is about that. It is about like making you to do what they want with their money, with their means, with the power that they have. So it's not only about listening people here. Trust me, like if they would want to be listened with the disposable income that they have, they could easily find venues. And we can go even further, like sex buyers are killers. People are like, whatever, they were in prostitution, like whatever. And I'm like, no, do you realize that it was a sex buyer, the one killing them? That is the missing part that you are not getting. And again, I think that is so close to us. We don't talk about the sex buying, how it's harmful. We always think that nothing is going to happen, that these great individuals helping people in the community and people in need. Sadly, we all know sex buyers. That's why you don't want to talk about it, because they are parents, there are brothers, there are cousins, your teacher, your doctor, your lawyer. How do you reconcile that? Like, there's no way that you are harming other people and you come back home and tell me like, oh, I love you, I want the best for you, I want you to thrive, I want you to be a doctor, a lawyer, like earn all these things, like be the great for you, and be outside choosing or like reinforcing that there's a sector of people that is like, you are just here to satisfy me. Like, how we can reconcile that? How am I going to address sex buying if my dad was a sex buyer? My whole family, all the males are sex buyers. Like, how am I going to talk against this? Because it means talking about my own community, my own family, my loved ones. It's very hard. It creates this idea that is like, so I'm against my own family, I'm against my own community. It is very hard. I think that we don't have tools for just regular people, like people that are not engaged in the anti-trafficking movement, that have a little bit of more like understanding about the nuances of this. It's very hard for them because it's like, we don't know what's happening behind doors. I don't know if you have killed someone. I don't know if you have content warning, like if you have raped them and you let them like bleeding, or like if you defecate on them, if you choke them and they almost die like several times in that act. And I think there is this also idea that sex buyers get a free pass around abuse and violence. And and this is real. I have heard people saying like, sex buying serves to reduce sexual violence toward women and girls. And I'm like, you are like, there's no justification for abuse and violence. Like, so you decide to sacrifice a part of our community, a part of ourselves, for the better of other people that are a lot of times more privileged. Oh, so we are talking about oppression. Great. I thought that we were in this great world where we all have the same rights, and it's not that. It's really not that.
It really serves as kind of a form of human sacrifice. I think what you're saying, like, we choose to look the other way. We choose to keep this veil of secrecy, and we say, okay, well, we know there's some collateral damage, but those were the people who were living the wrong way. They got themselves into that. They're going to have to deal with it. You keep going back to this need for the space for men and boys to be able to, and I was just sitting here thinking, what if boys and men, it would just break the conversation open if boys and men started talking about sexual violence, honestly. And it's been hard for me to have this conversation with men in my own life, even men who are very open with me. But when I want to go deeper in the conversation and get more structural and get more, there's a resistance to it. And, it's almost a defensiveness. And I kind of perceive it as masculinity puts boys in this position, like you're saying, where you have to always fight to be on the top. And in doing that, you identify with the perpetrator. You were talking about the victims taking on the shame of the perpetrator. And that's the number one symptom in sexual abuse survivors is we take on that shame. Anything that the perpetrator did, we feel like we did it. And I can see boys and men having this kind of double layer of that where they are taking on the shame as victims and then also identifying with the perpetrator so that when you start talking about, because these are horrific subjects, this is really, really painful. And when you start bringing that pain up, I feel like they start to feel like you're attacking them or like there's a perpetrator in them that they have to protect. So we know that the perpetrators know that this is about violence and violation. And I think that a lot more non-perpetrating men have been victims. And even those who haven't been victims, they know a lot more about it than they want to let themselves, let alone anybody else, know. And how do we break that conversation open? Where can we take that?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think that, and I have been asked this before, like, so you advocate for men and boys as victims and survivors. So that means that you're against all the work that is being done towards addressing the violence and abuse towards women and girls. And I'm like, when did I say that? I never say that. I'm a huge advocate that one of the biggest perpetrators are men and boys. Like, and I will never be silent about that. We have all this historical background, how women and girls have always been seen as a property, how it is happening now with child marriage, how it is happening now with regular relationships, that women and girls have less value in society. And I think that we need to start making sense of that. I think that the first part to start breaking this silence around sexual violence, that men and boys can be also victims and survivors, and at the same time recognizing, but there also can be perpetrators and abusers, men and boys, it's less harder for us to live in society. And that's the reality. A lot of males don't want to recognize that privilege, don't want to recognize why it can be triggering for a male to be in a room full of female victims or survivors of sexual violence. But the one who raped me, it was a male. As males, it's our work to really recognize that we benefit from patriarchy. Even if you have experienced poverty, sexual violence, and all these things, the reality is that it's easier for males to go to the top. And we live in a very hierarchical society. We need to start recognizing all that. And the other part is that when we say that males are the perpetrators and you haven't done it, it's fine. You don't need to take it personal. We're not saying that you're the perpetrator. I have never been triggered when people say like, males are the perpetrators and they can jail. And I'm like, yes. And I'm here still existing as a male and struggling and be like, and I'm a survivor of sexual violence, like, and all these things. And like, that doesn't mean that I need to separate myself from all these things. Like, we always want to see things as black and white, but we need to start really educating and talking about how prevalent is sexual violence in men and boys. As we were saying, that like our childhood experiences have a huge impact on all adults. I think that that's the other thing, really creating venues for men and boys to disclose without the need to be told that they are weak, that they cannot protect their family, that they are not mad enough, that they are not strong enough. And it's very hard. I think that those values are just the core and the structure of our society. When we talk about mental health, when we talk about any issue, these things come in part. And I think that also we need to start talking about the impact and saying that it wasn't the victims or the survivors' fault. That's one thing that I have seen that it resonates with everyone, regardless their gender, their sexuality. It's like, no, it's not because you are a woman that this happened to you. Like, it's like all these systems that are in place that you never choose. Like, you cannot choose to be abused. You cannot choose to be trafficked. You cannot choose to be raped. Like, that was never in your control. Like, it was totally the other person choosing that from you, and that's why it's one of the components of abuse, like that unbalance of power and control, and creating venues for that. Also, like really educating male and boys that it's okay to talk about your struggles. A lot of people ask me like, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm struggling. And it's fine. I'm not gonna die for saying that. Like, I'm really struggling. It's a very hard world to live in. Really going against the myths of like mental health, substance use, that all males are aggressive, that the only way that we can interact is aggression. Really talking about dominance, power, how a lot of times our actions as males and boys reinforce sexual violence, reinforce the objectification of the body of women, girls, and other communities. And really talking about also how all these things are impacting us in reality, how the silence is impacting us, how many perpetrators we know that because there are males, we have decided to protect them, how this is living in our minds, how we all are like victims and survivors, and that's totally fine. That's not going to reduce your value. We need to start talking about all these things. We need to start talking about that male and boys can also experience sexual abuse, can also experience trafficking, not because things happen to them that they cannot be successful, that they cannot thrive in life. That also, I think that one of the big ideas is, especially for heterosexual men, is like, if I'm a survivor of sexual violence, everybody's gonna assume first that I'm gay, second, not woman will want me or accept me. And that's totally false. That's not real. That's what all these perpetrators want us to believe, to stay in silence, to not fight against them. And I will say that also, just having the compassion to everyone, I think that we can fight against patriarchy and at the same time keep men accountable, and at the same time recognize that there can be also victims and survivors. That's totally something that we can accomplish. Feminism is not a movement where everybody involved in feminism is against males, but it's recognizing how abuse, power, and systems are like thriving out of exploiting women and girls. That's the reality. And it's getting so out of hand that if you don't fit perfectly the definition of masculinity, it's gonna affect you sooner than later. And it doesn't affect you, guess what? It's gonna affect your loved ones. That's the reality. It's gonna affect your kids. It's gonna affect someone that you love. We don't live isolated in this world. If we don't fight against exploitation, if we don't fight against sexual abuse, all this form of abuse and violence, you are not exempt of being impacted by it.
Your compassion is just so palpable. I can really hear the love behind, what you're pushing here. And what you said about boys and men needing to be able to say, I'm struggling. I'm sitting here and thinking about the way that these trauma responses, and we get defensive, and we're not going to be able to have a public conversation until we can have a conversation with ourselves. I know that this was true for myself, getting through this kind of trauma mess so that I can talk out loud. And the idea of men learning this self-compassion as a first step is really interesting to me. And I'd like to hear more about your own healing journey and how you kind of went from that island of masculinity and through the being lost at sea to finding that connection and especially that self-compassion.
Yes, no, absolutely. And there's one thing that not because you were a victim or survivor, that doesn't justify that you're harming other people. I think that there can be healing for you, but also we need accountability systems for you. Like you deserve all the compassion and love, but that doesn't mean that we are gonna give you a free pass to harm others. I think that a lot of times we forget that compassion, love, caring about others is really keeping people accountable. It's not giving them a free pass. That's a very, very important part of the conversation. When we talk about violence and all these things, it's like, but I was a victim too. Yes, but women that were victims, they are not like raping people like crazy just because they were victims too. Like that's not a justification. Like harm will never justify harm. Like no, like we need to keep you accountable because that's how we start healing, by keeping people accountable. So I would say that, to be honest, it's very easy to cling on this island because a lot of times it's the only thing that it keeps you floating. We have been put this idea ingrained of us that if you care about others, you're gonna lose yourself. Or like, I think that the other extreme is like, oh, you're gonna stop caring about others and sacrificing yourself for others. And I think that that applies for women and men. I see it how a lot of times men take this role of, I need to be the protective, I need to be the one giving the money in the household or like wherever I'm living with my partner. I'm gonna take this role and I'm gonna forget about everything else. I don't have feelings, I don't need time for connections. My only role is gonna be the provider. And I have seen also in women. So I think that as males, we don't want to hear that. And I think that when people say it to us, we think that they are attacking us. Have you ever experienced like sexual trauma or things like that? When we talk about this sensitive topic, it's like, why? Are you going to judge me? Are you going to put the shame on me? There's guilt on me. I have never talked about this. And I'm fine. As a society, we really prefer that because healing is painful. I think that a lot of times we romanticize healing. Healing is very painful. I go to therapy, I take medications, I receive also support from a psychiatrist. It's extremely, extremely painful. And a lot of times it's a very lonely path. And I think that that's why a lot of, especially males, are like, I'm already alone. Why should I be putting myself in hardship to suffer more? Like that doesn't make sense at all. It's easier if I just continue with my behaviors. I can see that they are not doing me any harm now, but they say that it's harming other people, but why should I care? And I think that we are seeing the results, especially with the incel community, how they are blaming women for everything that is happening to them. I think that this is the natural response when we don't talk about trauma, when we don't talk about the impact that it has having, when we don't talk about like intergenerational trauma, when we don't talk about sexual violence, it gets internalized. It becomes like a part of yourself, and it's like, I cannot live without behaving in this way, and I'm not gonna change. The other ones are the problem. And again, and we understand all this from other movements, but when it comes to prostitution, exploitation, sexual violence, like, suddenly it's like, we don't know why people act like that. We are very, very hesitant about accountability and males. To be honest, a lot of times when I talk about all this issue, a lot of males get uncomfortable. But I'm here like, well, if you have never done anything like or like harm other people, like why should this be uncomfortable to you? We need to talk about this is the reality of people. This is the reality of women and girls. This is the reality of kids. This is the reality of immigrants. And because we decide to stay silent, it's not that they are just being abused. A lot of times they ended up dead. But again, like healing is painful. Healing is a very lonely journey. But I would say that for especially hope that a lot of male and boys are listening, it is really worthy. Being able not only to connect with other people, being able to cry, being able to laugh, being able to question yourself, being able to create community, being able to enjoy yourself and be mindful about what is happening in the world, it's really, really worth it. Because as humans, we definitely need connections. I'm very, very grateful that I know a lot of people, especially women and girls, other men that are in this movement, that are really fighting against exploitation because they have created the path before me to being able to heal to this point. So the reality is that even if it feels lonely, I would say that we are swimming in the ocean, like trying to be like, are you there? Are there more people like me there? There is a lot of times. It's just that it's hard to connect. Don't be afraid of showing your feelings. Male and boys can also experience abuse, violence, especially sexual violence. It's never going to be the fault of the people who have experienced this. And it's totally fine that you deserve healing. There are resources for men and boys. Just take the steps to start addressing this. Living in this world is not only about ourselves as individuals, but also how we connect with one each other. And I really believe that connecting with one each other and being able to enjoy this world, I think that personally, thinking that one day prostitution is not going to be normalized, that we're going to understand the impact of it, it's a lot of times what keep me floating. So for everyone listening to this, compassion, love are totally normal components in human life. And if you haven't received them, it's not your fault. A lot of times this is done in purpose just to continue perpetuating the system that are exploiting us. Healing, it gives a lot of insight and it allows to enjoy the world in a very different and holistic way. It allows you to breathe. It allows you to see things that you weren't able to see before. It allows you to fight against the abuse and violence in this world, especially when it's this normalized. So like, I really encourage everyone to look for mental health support. Even if you have been in prostitution, even if you have engaged in the act of selling, if you have been bought and sold, that doesn't define you. There's healing for everyone. And you don't need also to identify with a certain label to access all those things. Like, there's here a whole community that will hear you, and we want just to continue healing together. Like, struggling, healing, there's ups and downs, and also it's totally fine. But let's all fight together against the buying and selling of individuals.
That's wonderful. I just want to respond to one thing that you were saying, and then I'll let you close out what you were saying about how painful healing is. And anybody who has been through the healing process will tell you it is not rainbows and roses. But for me, the most part of that pain is looking at parts of yourself that are already in pain. And it seems like, masculinity is one way. As a woman, we don't have that way to kind of opt out of looking at the pain. But, I see women find other ways to not look at trauma. And when we don't look at that pain, we just close that part of ourselves off in a dungeon, really. And we don't have access to that part of ourselves that is holding that pain. But if we can go through this healing journey and be honest and look at it and be kind, and that self-compassion I was talking about, compassion for the weak parts of ourselves, the victim parts of ourselves, finding love for the victim. And if we can do that in ourselves, then we can do it when we look at each other. Like I said, that pain is there no matter what. But when you close it off, like you're saying, you cut off this whole experience of life. And this last thing you just said, you cut off your ability to fight. Like, that's where real power comes from, right? That's where real liberation and real, like, being a man, I would say, or being a woman, being a fully autonomous, fully alive, powerful, able to respond and protect yourself and your loved ones. Like you said, if you go through that pain, what you can be on the other side of it is just more than you ever imagined.
Yes, no, absolutely. And for everyone who have experienced trauma, abuse, violence, and especially for men and boys who are listening this, you did the best that you could in that situation. A lot of times we judge ourselves from the present self, but our past parts, the part that experienced that trauma, the part that experienced that abuse, those parts, they didn't have the knowledge that you have now. They didn't have the experience that you have now. They didn't have the tools that you have now. A lot of times they were kids living in a world of adults who were abusers. So you did the best that you could do to survive. It's hard to accept that, but because of all the work that these parts and yourself has done, is because you are still here. You have always been fighting for yourself, and a lot of times these responses can be like being silent, never talking about this trauma. never talking about these experiences, never disclosing them, becoming aggressive because it's the only way that you can prevent it. And that makes sense. But it was never your fault. And there's a lot of pain that came out of that, because knowing that we couldn't protect ourselves, that we try our best, and still there are consequences, I think that the reality is that it's very unfair. Because the ones who are always dealing with the consequences, it's us, like the victims, the survivors, those who have experienced trauma. It's a lot of times we are dealing with it through our whole lives. But men and boys, you don't need to go through this alone. There's other people that have experienced similar stuff, and you don't need also to become a perpetrator to find your place in this world. Harming other people is not a way of healing, but it's a way of reinforcing that whatever happened to you, it's okay. So let's break that contract. Let's break that idea. Whatever happened to you, it was unfair. You did your best. My main motivation is like, if while talking about this, it's going to prevent someone being abused from someone really double thinking about, like, should I continue buying sex? Like, it is worth it. Like, if it's stopping the violence and abuse, the exploitation of other individuals, it is really worth it. So I really invite you to break all these ideas that we have put in our minds. Like, being a real man doesn't mean that you need to be abusive, doesn't mean that you need to harm others. We need to break that idea that we have. You don't need to be a man, a woman. You need to be a human being. A human being will allow you to experience all feelings, connect with other individuals, and acknowledge all that harm that is being done in order to really stop it.
It's beautiful, Christian. Thank you so much again for your time today, for this conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours. This has been great. Is there anything that you're working on right now, or any links or someplace you want to send people?
Just everybody educate yourself about patriarchy. This is something very real. I know that a lot of people get very defensive. It's like, no, we are not benefiting from anything. This is a lie. It's not. It's a reality. I always encouraging everyone to read The Creation of Patriarchy. Last Girl First is another one. It gives a great analysis of how prostitution is truly a system that has been implemented through history, that is not only about individuals, and how it has been affecting us. One big thing that I always advocating is that let's remove the stigma and all these stereotypes about people who are engaged in prostitution, prostituted people who are being bought and sold. We all deserve services, support. Educate yourself also about the real impact of prostitution. There's a study from the United Nations, one of the special rapporteurs, that it's great. It explains why sex work, it's really not a way to address or talk about prostitution. Prostitution is very complex. It's an issue that is affecting all of us. And also, here in the United States, we are really working on implementing the equality, the Nordic model. I know that there are a lot of myths around it. So in New York State, you can go and search for New Yorkers for the equality model on social media. There are several states that are trying to implement the equality model. And let's just continue advocating everyone against sexual violence. Face the realities of the world. We're living in a very hard world. It seems that we're going backwards, but the people all across the world, like, we are fighting against all this abuse, violence, and you are not alone in this fight. So join us. We promise that we're fun when we are not talking about all these things, and you're not alone. Seriously, you are really not alone. It's okay to be a dissident. It's okay to not resonate with the mainstream ideas that sex work is work. Sex work is not work. Prostitution, it's a system that it's exploiting people, and we need to dismantle it from the roots.
Awesome. Join the fight, fellas. It's good over here. It's good to be fighting, not just sitting around being quiet.
Absolutely.
I thank you so much. I thank listeners. I hope you found this conversation interesting. And if so, go check out Cristian Eduardo. You're on Instagram. You're on Facebook, I think.
Yes.
So we'll have all of the links in our description. And thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
We hope you found this episode informative. To follow us on social media, click the links in the show notes below. If there is a topic you would like us to cover, you can contact us at redlightexposé.podcast@gmail.com or head on over to our website, redlightexposé.com. There you can also find a donation page if you'd like to support the show. All the hosts at Red Light Exposé are volunteers, so we rely on your donations to continue to compensate our survivor guests and cover operative costs. Thank you for listening. We hope you tune in next time.